there is a microscopic detail that separates those who keep going from those who live in constant restarts. And the most curious part is that it almost never appears in traditional advice about discipline, focus, or productivity. It's not talent. It's not intelligence. It's not willpower. It's something so small that most people ignore it. And precisely because of that, it decides the game in the long run. While some people move forward slowly but consistently, others spend their lives trapped in a cycle of excitement, collapse, and new beginnings, believing the problem is them, when in reality, it lies in an invisible point of the process. You may recognize yourself in this. You start strong. You get excited. You make plans. You organize your routine. In the first days or weeks, everything flows. The energy is there. The identity is strong. You feel like someone who has finally figured it out. And then, at some point, something happens. An unexpected event. A bad day. A small break in the routine. Nothing serious. Nothing definitive. But enough to interrupt the flow. And that is exactly where the microscopic detail comes into play. Most people believe that what separates those who continue is the ability to come back quickly, to motivate themselves again, to restart with intensity. But that's not it. What truly separates those who continue from those who restart is whether or not there was a complete rupture along the way. Because every rupture creates a before and an after. And every time you have to restart, you don't come back from the same place. You come back with weight, with pressure, with accumulated expectations. Those who continue are not the ones who never fail. They are the ones who fail without breaking the thread. The ones who go through bad days without dropping everything to zero. The ones who understand, sometimes intuitively, that the cost of disappearing is greater than the cost of doing very little. That is the microscopic detail. Not allowing the thread to break. Not letting contact be completely interrupted, even when execution is weak, even when the day doesn't cooperate, even when motivation doesn't show up. The brain doesn't operate through big conscious decisions all the time. It operates through patterns, through repetition, through association. When you completely interrupt something, even for good reasons, the brain records absence, and repeated absence becomes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who starts and stops. Not because you chose that, but because the pattern repeated often enough to feel true. And then, every new beginning comes loaded with internal distrust. The microscopic detail acts before that. It shows up in the moment when you realize you won't be able to do it properly today, that you won't perform well, that you won't meet the ideal standard. That's where most people decide, without noticing, that it's better to do nothing. Those who continue make a different choice. Not a nobler one, not a more heroic one, just a different one. The choice to do something small enough not to disappear. Something that doesn't impress. Something that doesn't create pride. Something that simply keeps the thread alive. The climax of this difference shows up over time, not in the day itself. On the day, the difference between doing a little and doing nothing feels irrelevant, almost ridiculous. 1 page read, 1 sentence written, 2 minutes of attention. It seems to change nothing, but the brain registers it. It understands. This is still part of who I am. And that message changes everything. Because when the next day arrives, you're not starting over from zero. You're simply continuing. Those who live in constant restarts always have to overcome the emotional barrier of beginning. They have to negotiate with themselves. They have to rebuild their identity. They have to deal with the guilt of having stopped. Those who continue don't need to do any of that. They never fully left. And that creates an enormous advantage. Even if it's invisible in the short term, the advantage of not needing to convince yourself to come back because you never went away. There is a cruel irony here. People who are more demanding of themselves tend to suffer more from this microscopic detail because they hold a high standard. They don't like doing things poorly. They associate value with intensity, quality, and full commitment. And when they can't reach that standard, they prefer to stop rather than do a little. What looks like excellence in practice becomes rupture, and rupture comes with a high cost later. Those who continue redefine what counts as a win on bad days. The win is not making progress. It's not disappearing, not breaking the bond, not turning a pause into a silent ending. This requires less force than it seems, but more awareness. It requires understanding that real progress is not linear, but it also doesn't need to be interrupted. It can crawl. It can shrink. It can almost stop, as long as it doesn't become zero. The microscopic detail doesn't show up in motivational quotes because it's not exciting. It doesn't give you a sense of breakthrough. It doesn't create an emotional spike. It only creates continuity. And continuity isn't sexy, but it's powerful. It's what allows someone, months later, to look back and realize they never had to restart. There was never a coming back. There was only continuing, in the way that was possible. If you honestly look at your own history, you'll probably see this clearly. The areas of your life where you feel the most stable are not the ones where you always gave your maximum. They're the ones where you never let things drop completely to zero, where even during rough periods, some minimal gesture was maintained. And the areas where you feel the most frustration are usually the ones marked by long silences between attempts. The good news is that this microscopic detail is available to anyone. It doesn't depend on talent, time, or ideal conditions. It depends on a simple decision, made repeatedly, the decision to maintain contact, to leave a trace, to not turn bad days into total disappearance. This decision doesn't fix everything at once, but it changes the trajectory. And trajectory, in the long run, is everything. Now I want to hear from you. In which area of your life do you notice that you keep restarting instead of continuing? Something that always goes back to the starting point after a pause? Write it in the comments. Naming it is the first step to noticing where the thread is breaking. If this video resonated with you, leave a like, it helps this message reach more people who are stuck in the restart cycle. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now. Not as a grand promise, but as a small gesture of continuity. Because in the end, what separates those who continue from those who always restart isn't doing more. It's simply not disappearing.